Don't mess with Texas. My ass. For real. I think it's time we start messing with Texas. Because, let me tell you, with all the false flags, the ridiculous amount of false flags, the ridiculous amount of psychological operations, a home base to the U.S. Army Reserve, Civilian Affairs Psychological Command, Jade Helm, you name it, Texas, especially in areas that we've, already identified as MK Ultra areas. Austin, Texas, and San Antonio. If something's going on there, somewhere in that story is a psychological operations, bullshit, and a false flag. Almost always. It's time we really start narrowing in. You know what? If anything I've learned lately is, they don't want attention. So let's give them some fucking attention. Texas needs to have some eyes on it. Everything from Alex Jones to all these other shills that happen to go to Texas. Now, if you got a suspected shill out there and they're going to Texas, they need eyes on them. You need to look at any groups they may be associated with, groups, the Masons in Texas, the St. Huberists, that group where that Anthony Scalia even supposedly died. Well, whatever happened to him. We never get the really true full story. Who knows what happened to him? But that happened in Texas, right near Sutherland Springs. All kinds of shit in Texas. It's time we start messing with Texas. Looking into the church organizations. Blizzard, you need to chill out. I know you can handle Texas, but I'm talking about other people need to look into it. I know you already know, all right? So relax. Relax. Chill. Relax. Thank you very much. Anyways, as I was saying, Texas, bullshit all across the board. Alex Jones Studios, all the psychological operations that were going on at the University of Texas, Austin, all the way even to their medical center. They have a medical research center that, they are behind a whole bunch of shit. Everything from the Zika virus bullshit to you name it, okay? We need to really pay attention to what goes on in Texas. I'm not going to sit here and, talk about every organization that we found before and whatnot because they're still under investigation. But people need to look into churches, strange churches, church groups, weird organizations, all that shit going on in the Austin area, Dallas area, San Antonio area, okay? Keep an eye on it. And anybody that's associated supposedly, to Texas, and they're also in the truth community, they need the eyes on them, okay? And just like Alex Jones, people have caught him not being normal in the head. Of course, you could see that also because he does so many shows and he's a fucking nut job. But we need to find out more about him. We understand the connections to Skull and Bones and everything else through the production, but we need to understand where's this programming come from. And if you think about it, all right, why it would be an important place for, our deep state, central intelligence agency, whatever you want to call them, to run these type of operations out of Texas. You have a long tradition of Texas being very independent. And you see a political system, our political system, kind of amok. And, if the political system's amok and you got independent people, that's, ripe for revolution. And they don't want independent revolution. If they're going to have a revolution, we know these Masons throughout history, they want to control the revolution under their own control. So, independent, strong-minded people in Texas, they're going to have to run a lot of psychological operations to control the population there. So everything through the churches, through the secret societies, Masons, and whatnots, all the way down to the Lions Club. Because I've even caught Lions Club and all these different organizations involved with false flags. United Way is another one, big one that's very involved in false flags. The upper echelon of the United Way. So these things need to be looked into. You know, the corporations that are involved some way or another in these false flags, and the people. You know, we've looked into many, you know, I don't want to get too crazy into the certain people that are involved in this stuff in Texas, but it's amok. And, you know, find out more about them. We need to start identifying individuals that are involved in all this shit, and Texas is a hub. You know, I recognize that there were hubs across the country, and, you know, we have to be careful on how we handle this information, because if too much gets around and too much gets out there, these people will move. The hard thing is going to be for anything to move in Texas is they've got so much money invested in these psychological operations and other false flags and bullshit going on there, and so many people involved in the program. So it's not something they can easily move, okay? But they will if it gets, you know, too much out there. So let's find out as much as we can. Only share the very important stuff with people you trust and you know, because we're finding out this truth community is basically run by the people that are involved in all this shit. So it's scary. It's scary that there's not too many real people out there. If you see a connection to Texas, you need to investigate whoever it is thoroughly. Todd Bennett connected that Shema Yisrael and the 153 and all that crazy cult shit. He's strongly connected to shit going on in Texas. So people need to understand it's time to mess with Texas. You know, I'm sure there's many people out there that have been looking at these false flags. And they've come to realize that, well, there's an awful lot of them. More than any of us really even know. I think many of us that have studied this realize there's false flags that go on that we don't even know about. And are at the point, if you look at all the cities they do them in and all the different places they do them in, that they are pretty much just about an everyday occurrence if you look at the whole big picture. There's also a realization that you may come over once you really look into these things, that there's a lot of false flags that go on that you don't even know are false flags or are not, well, so publicized. When I started looking into these things, I came across a false flag. Well, nobody else recognized it as a false flag, but I recognized it. It was one of these bullshit deals where there was a shooting. They didn't publicize it so much, but there was no blood and nobody really got shot. And the people that were affected were this unique family, okay? And they were tied to some, like usual, a weird religious group. And, well, only, I guess, the people that are involved in the false flag, which are mostly made up of the police and town officials, and me, and along with a couple other people that actually understood what was going on, know about this situation, okay? The interesting part of this situation was where there were two brothers that get shot, and the police go back to raid their home where they kind of lived off the grid. And the two sisters, well, one of them, they locked up both of them. One of them was believing that she was going to have an immaculate conception. She was believing that she was chosen to give birth to a child without actually ever having sex. You know, a very unique I guess it's not unique. The story's kind of old if you think about it. Go ahead. That's not a unique story, but I mean unique in that somebody in this day and age would be thinking something like this. Okay. And as we come across these people that I guess, Matilda said it best, they're crisis shills. They're crisis truthers, fake truthers. And, we're starting to see the groups that they're involved in, and these weird religious groups, and how they're always tied to these weird religious groups. Whether it's a New Age religion guru person that they're tied to, or some other weird religion cult that they're tied to. They're always tied to these little, weird religious groups. Okay? So I think it's quite fascinating that these people are under this weird mind control. And when these false flags are not advertised, it's almost like they're setting them up to call them back in because they start veering off into their own beliefs, which are, predicated on what they've been programmed as. So when that programming comes out into the public, they almost have to call them back in for reprogramming because, they can't be going around the public telling everybody that they're going to have an immaculate conception, can they? People would recognize that and be like, whoa, what the hell's going on here? So you really have to examine these false flags and see what's going on. I've spoken to some people that are, they've been around in this stuff for a long time, and they understand some of this stuff, but never ever talk about it. I think it's time that we start talking about these people that are doing these things, because what's happening is these people that are part of these different groups that are involved in these false flags and this bullshit and this deception and these weird cults are also playing a major role in the truth community. And to me, that's completely unacceptable. It's just wrong. That the same people that are involved in putting these shows on are the same people that are telling you about the shows, that they themselves are putting on. It's ridiculous. It's quite ridiculous. And I think when you really look into these people, you could see it. Recently we've been able to see more than ever how these people operate in, these different types of brain programming that are going on. And we're even starting to find where they're getting this programming. These centers that call them back in and whatnot. It's just so bizarre. Oftentimes they revolve around, prisons. And these companies that own these particular prisons and run these jails and prisons. And, you have to see the subsidiaries, the companies that work with these companies that own these facilities. There's always that long chain of bullshit. It's that escape from culpability that they use to protect themselves from ever really being held accountable for the bullshit they do. But they're always set up. You gotta remember, we look at all these groups and groups and groups. But one of the common links that they kind of need to have is this corporate link. That's somewhere down the line and involved with somebody. And the reason why is because money. They want to be able to spend the money, earn the money, and spend the money that gets shoved into these groups. So, you see these corporations, you see these different entities that are involved with this. And there's a money trail. So we see the bigger picture here. And the bigger picture is that people don't realize how big this all is and how much of the community where so many people learned about this bullshit being put on is actually being run by the people that put this shit on. Every day we're seeing through it more and more. And it's kind of scary. But you can't get so frustrated that, it's just so big and so ridiculous. Well, that's also part of their downfall. The downfall is, when people break free and are able to start seeing how they operate and how big it really is and how ridiculous it is. You know, and that scares them the most. They don't want people that can see through their bullshit. And people are starting to see. At least there's the few of us that have been investigating this stuff. You know, and that's what scares them the most, is that we see the bigger picture of what they're all involved in. That scares the living shit out of them. But, you know, hey, for all the fear and bullshit they've put on so many people, they deserve to be scared. They deserve to maybe live in a little more fear that there's people that understand what they're doing and are not scared to come after them.